Egypt in Sharm el-Sheikh. That's going to take place in just a few hours' time. Noor Odeh, you're following developments in Israel from Jordan's capital, Amman, because the Israeli government has banned Al Jazeera from reporting in Israel and the occupied West Bank. What are you hearing about this? Is Netanyahu confirmed to go?
Well, we don't have official confirmation, Dareen, but the Israeli media and some Arab outlets are in fact reporting that upon Trump's insistence, Netanyahu may be also attending the Sharm el-Sheikh summit, and that there was a phone call between him and the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. We have to wait and see if there's an official statement from the Israeli Prime Minister's office or from the Egyptian President's office, but this was something that really was a poke in the eye for Netanyahu. On the one hand, this summit is discussing the future of Gaza, of Palestine in general, of the reconstruction, of a path to two states, perhaps, all of which are subjects that Netanyahu doesn't want to touch. And on the other, the detractors of Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel were telling him, why weren't you invited? You don't seem to be very popular in the region, and certainly it doesn't look like you have a lot of control or influence over the events. It's really a catch-22 for the Israeli Prime Minister. Not attending will make him look quite isolated and irrelevant. Attending will make him look like he's complicit in ending the war. And for his right-wing allies in the government, this is a break-it point. And one commentator who is traditionally known to be quite close to Benjamin Netanyahu said the visit will seal his fate, and Israel might be looking at early elections.
Noor, speaking of that, we understand also that some ministers have decided to boycott today's session at the Knesset, right, where Netanyahu is meant to speak, and so is President Donald Trump in just a short time. We are looking at the live picture, and we do expect them to start speaking this hour.
Yeah, it is quite phenomenal. I saw at least one member of the Knesset from the Otzma Yehudi Jewish Power Party saying that she will boycott the speech, that this was not a ceasefire or an agreement for peace, that this was a disgrace. It didn't secure Israel's security. Let's just remember and remind our viewers, Dareen, the coalition, ruling coalition in Israel is the most right-wing in Israel's history. They've waged war. They've been waging war on 7 fronts for the past 2 years, and they don't want to end any of them. In fact, we heard from Netanyahu less than 24 hours ago saying the war is not over. He didn't mention Gaza by name. He alluded to some so-called enemies that were attempting to rearm and regroup. But the idea that Israel can wage war indefinitely, can annex territory, can call the shots, can attack capitals around the region without any accountability, without any breaks, is what this coalition wants. And it's exactly, at least for the moment, what Trump seems to want to end.
For anyone joining us this hour, Noor, just walk us through what's happened so far, because in the past hours you've been telling us how the choreography of today has been so significant, right? Trump's arrival to Tel Aviv coincided with the release of the living captives from Gaza. Just walk us through all of that.
Yeah, well, since the 8 in the morning local time, we saw the first batch of living Israeli captives released, 7 initially, as the plane of Donald Trump was touching down in Tel Aviv. The remaining 13 living Israeli captives were released from Hamas captivity, handed over to the International Committee of the Red Cross, which delivered them to the Israeli army. The army, of course, still remaining in Gaza, and 53% of the enclave. The captives were checked. They received an initial medical checkup. They were then transported to the ground for the population. That Israel has killed almost 70,000 people and has devastated Gaza, turned it into a demolition site, as Trump said. So a lot of things are moving, all revolving around Donald Trump.
Okay, Noor, thank you. Hind al-Khudari is joining us from the south of the Gaza Strip this hour. Hind, so we can see crowds of people behind you, celebrations. Tell us what's going on and what sorts of preparations are being made in Khan Yunis, where you are, to receive the Palestinian prisoners who are expected to be freed by Israel today.
So, Darine, all the people behind me are either relatives, the family members, the beloved ones of those who are going to be freed in the next coming hours. Now, we know that the buses are on their way to the Gaza Strip, and they started moving after the 20 Israeli captives left the Gaza Strip, and they're now in Israeli custody. As you see, Palestinians are celebrating. They're trying to spend time as they're waiting for their beloved ones. Now, what we know is when they arrive, the Palestinian prisoners arrive, they're going to be transferred to Nasser Hospital's medical point, where they're going to receive medical checkpoint and medical assessment. Now, what we also know and see is the ICRC on the ground, their medical teams, their logistics teams, and they're also protection teams. After they finish all the things they need to do with them, they're going to be greeted with the Palestinians here. We see mothers, we see daughters, we see babies, we see fathers, we see grandfathers waiting and counting the minutes to see their beloved ones. Let me remind you that we're expecting at least 1,700 Palestinian prisoners to be released today. Most of them, all of them have been arrested or missing since October 7, 2023. There's a mother that is holding and carrying her baby and said that her baby didn't see her father because she gave birth after he was arrested. So there's a lot of stories today, and everyone is counting the minutes. They're counting the hours to see their beloved ones. They know that it's going to be late because every time the Israeli authorities delay the Palestinian prisoners, but they're willing to wait for another day because they have been waiting for so long. It's indeed a very happy day. It's a day of freedom, and it's a day of reunion for a lot of Palestinian families today.
Okay, Hind, we'll cross back to you a little later. Thank you so much for the time being. Here in the studio with us is Mohammed Al-Masri. He's a political analyst and a professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies, and Nida Ibrahim, Al Jazeera's correspondent. Mohammed, we now have confirmation from the Egyptian presidency spokesperson that Netanyahu will be joining the Sharm el-Sheikh summit in Egypt that's taking place later on today. Was this expected at all?
It's a surprise to me, at least. I was watching an interview actually last night on Al Jazeera Mubashir with Hamas leader, and he indicated that Hamas didn't have a problem not being there, not being in Sharm el-Sheikh themselves. But I think that was on the understanding that Netanyahu wouldn't be there either. So my hunch is that this is not going to sit well with Hamas. On the other hand, what I think is more important than what Netanyahu says or does, because I think we can all pretty well predict all of that, is what Donald Trump says and does in the coming hours and maybe over the next day or two. He's the person to keep an eye on. Which version of Donald Trump are we going to get? Are we going to get the Donald Trump who has, for the most part, for 4.5 years of being president, acquiesced to Israeli demands and given Israel the right to do whatever it wants? Or is it going to be the Donald Trump who has at times put his foot down and disagreed publicly with Netanyahu, commanded Netanyahu even to change course, done things that haven't sit well with Netanyahu, who wants to be a peacemaker, who wants to be a deal maker, who wants to sort of not let down these Arab and Muslim leaders that he likes so much? Which version of Donald Trump are we going to get?
Put that question right back at you. Which version are we going to get?
Well, if I had a crystal ball, Donald Trump is very unpredictable. He's unpredictable. My best guess is that this isn't going to change his fundamental calculation. I think he's throwing a bone to Netanyahu in all likelihood. Play ball. We'll get you what you want in the end, but I also have this larger peace initiative, and I think he's committed to it. That's my sense, as I said earlier, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think Donald Trump is very personally invested in this. When he starts tying this great peace as he calls it, to his own personal legacy as a kind of career-defining moment, then I think he's taking it seriously. And he's taking seriously what Arab and Muslim leaders have been telling him for the past I don't know how many weeks. So that's my best guess. But Donald Trump is always a wild card.
But don't forget that also President Mahmoud Abbas has been on his way to Sharm el-Sheikh. So having the Palestinian Authority there kind of probably gives the excuse of inviting Israel to kind of show that, okay, we have the Israeli part, we have the Palestinian part. And we know that the Palestinian Authority and the PLO have been pushing to be part of the day after in Gaza. This is something that also Hamas has signaled that it approves of, having the Palestinian Authority have a role there, saying that they will hand over their weapons to the Palestinian Authority, of course, as part.
Hey man, what's the best advice you can give someone that's in sales?
Switch to Monday CRM.
Oh, awesome. Thanks.
Hold up.
Is that there are attempts to try and crack down on some of the corruption that has been really one of the main things that Palestinians have been complaining of when it comes to the Palestinian Authority. So it seems like in the spirit of Trump listening to the Arabs as well as the Palestinians, that this is kind of an arrangement that's being agreed upon. The Palestinian Authority would be there, Israel would be there to try kind of bridge the gaps.
Are these the types of conversations that are being had behind the scenes, Nida? Is that what you're hearing from your sources?
Well, we had a meeting that was not behind the scenes. It was between the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair as well as the Palestinian Deputy President Hussein al-Sheikh. They met in Amman yesterday, and after that meeting we've heard about the involvement of the Palestinian Authority, an invitation that was presented by the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. But to your point, yes, behind the scenes, of course, the Palestinian Authority is part and has been derived from the PLO, and the PLO has been recognized by the international community as the sole representative of the Palestinian people. Of course, there has been so many issues between the Hamas and the PLO because Hamas says that the PLO refused to accept them inside this unifying umbrella that represents the Palestinians. Now, that remains to be seen, whether Hamas will still stay out of the picture, but no doubt that the Palestinian Authority is trying to find its way amongst these major deals, amongst these major plans that are being prepared for the region.
Mohammed al-Masri, we have comments from Russia's Lavrov, who has described Trump's plan as being, quote, too vague on Palestinian statehood. Is it too vague? I mean, how do you see this 20-point peace plan? It's referred to as a peace plan, right? Yeah. First phase right now is unfolding. Mm-hmm. What happens after the first phase?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been talking and writing about this now ever since it was put out, and I've been very critical of the plan. It is very vague. It doesn't address Palestinian agency. It doesn't address the blockade on Gaza. It doesn't address the occupation. There are all kinds of problematic elements here, right? When it talks about a foreign sort of almost imperial governing structure for Gaza and so on and so forth. But it seems to me that we have to look at the 20-point plan differently in light of what's happening now, in light of what's happening on the ground. When you have Donald Trump admitting about an hour and a half ago that he's open to revising key provisions in that 20-point plan, like, you know, even the Board of Peace with Tony Blair, referencing Hamas, several articles, then that suggests that there's a degree of flexibility on the part of the American president. And if that's the case, then we might actually see progress in the negotiations over the coming days.
Just to let our viewers know, what we're looking at, the upper right-hand side of their screen, that is some of the delegates and dignitaries arriving in Sharm el-Sheikh. So just a few moments ago, we saw the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi shaking hands with some of the first arrivals. So that summit is, of course, going to be a high-stakes summit, as described by many people. It's going to be co-chaired by both the U.S. President Donald Trump as well as the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. We understand there are going to be representatives from over 20 organizations and countries, like obviously representatives from the Middle East, from Europe, from Asia. We know as well, we do have confirmation, I believe, that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is going to be attending, as well as members of the Arab League, obviously, and the European Council. So that is what we're seeing in the upper right hand of the screen. On the left side, we're seeing Khan Yunis celebrations in Gaza, where Nida, Reuters news agency is reporting that the first of 38 buses carrying the released Palestinian prisoners have crossed into Gaza. Do we have confirmation on that?
Well, this is the first we're hearing about
Okay.
it from Reuters, but this goes in line with the fact that Hamas has handed over its captives. So because Trump is in Israel, I don't think the Israeli government is going to risk the deal by showing that it's not being consistent with the fact that they should now be releasing these buses and these Palestinians who are now gathering in Khan Yunis, awaiting to be reunited with their loved ones. We should remember that some of these Palestinians who are going to be released today include women, include minors, include people who, in Israel's admission, have nothing to do with October the 7th or carrying out attacks. Some people were arrested after Israeli forces were raiding hospitals, and they were kept there without any information to the human rights organizations. What's their fate? Why are they being held? Including Palestinians who we know have died in Israeli prisons. Again, when we say died, this is the term that the Israeli prison service uses, but this is not what Palestinians believe has happened. So anyone coming out today for their families, they're coming out from the unknown, they're coming out from a very difficult situation that could have led them to lose their lives inside Israeli prisons. No doubt this is going to be a moment that Gazans have been waiting for since the war started, a rare moment of joy and happiness. Of course, we have to remember that some of these people will be going back to a difficult reality. When we talked about the second ceasefire deal and the swap in Gaza, we've seen many people coming out not knowing that their loved ones have been killed, their loved ones have been displaced, their homes have been totally destroyed. So yes, they're probably going to come back, especially the ones who have been arrested in the beginning of the war, to a totally different Gaza than the ones they know.
Right, and according to the statistics we have, I mean, over 80% of Gaza has been completely decimated, so it will be a shock. Just stand by for just a moment, Nida and Muhammad. Let me bring in Basil Faraj, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Philosophy and Cultural Studies at Birzeit University, joining us from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Thanks for your time. So we expect around 2,000 Palestinian prisoners to be released from prisons like Ofer, from the Negev. Tell us what sorts of conditions these prisoners have been facing in the Israeli jails, and what's their condition like when they come out?
Thanks, Dareen. So, most certainly we will be witnessing horrific images and videos of Palestinian prisoners who've been subjected to the most brutal and violent torture and humiliation methods by the Israeli prison services, aided, of course, by the Israeli government. We know that since October 7th, while torture and violence had been systematically practiced inside Israeli prisons, these prisoners have been subjected to a brutal campaign in which we have actually described as another war that has been unleashed inside Israeli prisons. They have been starved intentionally, they have been denied medical care, they have been brutally beaten, tortured, and violated. We've witnessed and heard stories of sexual violence. In fact, we're talking about the killing of at least 85 Palestinian prisoners inside Israeli prisons. And I say at least because we know that the Israeli regime continues to hide information about the fate of thousands of Palestinian prisoners.
So that number could be an underestimate? That number then could be an underestimate?
Definitely. I mean, as we proceed with the ceasefire, we will be hearing about the corpses of Palestinian prisoners who are detained also. We have to remember here that historically, Israel has been retaining the bodies of Palestinian prisoners. They still continue to hold the bodies of Palestinian prisoners now in morgues and in cemeteries of numbers. So in fact, the images we will see will attest to the horrific natures that Palestinians and their organizations have been telling us from the beginning of the war, that the conditions are brutal, that Israel never and would never adhere to international law. And I think this only tells something about the systematic nature of the torture and violence that Palestinians have been historically subjected to, but in fact have been intensified since the beginning of the war.
What are you hearing about the numbers of Palestinian women and children currently held in jails?
Yeah, so we know that 53 Palestinian female prisoners are held inside Israeli prisons now, in addition to at least 400 Palestinian children, some of which hopefully, I think, according to the numbers we received, would be released, specifically those from the Gaza Strip. But we do know that these numbers, Israel has continuously arrested female and especially children. So we had hoped that, of course, for the release now, but we know that many of them would remain inside Israeli prisons and continue to face the horrific conditions that they have been enduring for the past 2 years. So I think this is also something that we have to highlight. The fact that those prisoners, of course, many of them have been sentenced for life imprisonment. I mean, imagine at least 190 of them have spent decades inside Israeli prisons. This is, of course, their only chance of having freedom after 20 or 25 years in captivity. But we do know that these conditions would continue, and I think this is something that we should bring the alarm for this. That the release of the prisoners now does not mean the end for the struggle of their freedom, but also the struggle to improve their conditions, and to say that what Israel has been exercising inside Israeli prisons is blatantly another step, another phase of the genocidal war it has been unleashing against Palestinian prisoners.
Bassel Faraj, stand by for just a moment, because we're going to unpack some of the numbers. Under the deal, roughly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners will be released in exchange for the 48 Israeli captives. Among them, 1,718 Palestinians from Gaza. The UN considers them forcibly disappeared. Then there are 250 Palestinians from the occupied West Bank, including occupied East Jerusalem. They've been serving life and long sentences, mostly for attacks or alleged involvement in violence against Israelis. 154 will be exiled. 96 are expected to be sent back to the occupied West Bank, and that includes occupied East Jerusalem. And ahead of the exchange, prisoners have been transported to Ofer prison near Ramallah and Ketziat prison in the Negev desert. So these are the live pictures from Ramallah, where we expect the Palestinian prisoners, at least some of them, to be released to. Bassel, back to you. What guarantees that those prisoners, once they are released, they are not rearrested once again?
No guarantees, Dareen. In fact, historically, Israel had rearrested. Let's just remember the Gilad Shalit exchange deal, where Israel, of course, arrested many of the prisoners who were released as part of that deal. In fact, the recent ceasefire agreements, so in November and January, also led to the rearrest of Palestinian prisoners. So I think there are no guarantees for the rearrest, and actually, unfortunately, of course, given that we are living under this brutal colonial regime, the fact that they might be threatened with execution, with killing by the Israeli regime. So there are no guarantees. I think those prisoners, particularly the ones who have spent life sentences behind bars, I think they definitely do face that kind of a looming threat continuously. But we have to recall something here. Remember something very important. Being released from Israeli prison does not mean in true liberation, because they would still be subject, at least those who are remaining in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, they would still be subject to Israel's military blockade, to Israel's military regime, which means not only facing the fear of rearrest, but being controlled, so their livelihoods, their ability to leave. So we have to also question, what does freedom mean under a brutal colonial Zionist regime, such as the ones we have been witnessing? And I just want to center again the fact that those prisoners who we would be, of course, monitoring their situation, but being released from Israeli captivity is definitely at this moment being released from a forthcoming death. So we have to just remember the brutal conditions they have been living under, and of course strive so that they can attain true freedom. Not only them, but also the ones who remain in Israeli custody. And we're talking about, of course, thousands of Palestinian prisoners who would still remain in Israeli prisons and unfortunately face the same brutal and horrendous conditions in captivity.
Bassel Faraj, thank you. You're an assistant professor in the Department of Philosophy and Cultural Studies at Birzeit University, speaking to us from Ramallah this hour. Thank you so much. Nida, what do you have for us?
A few minutes we will be seeing the Palestinian prisoners go outside, leave the buses and meet with their loved ones who are waiting for them in a hall in Ramallah. Again, we've been saying before how Israel usually would crack down on any scenes of celebrations near Ofer prison, where families would come in expecting and hoping to see their loved ones being released. These are iconic moments I've seen in the past, like young children children coming to see a rare scene of joy, of freedom of these Palestinian prisoners. But that's exactly why Israel does not want to show these images, does not want Palestinians to be celebrating this occasion. So that's why the buses have been released from outside Offer prison, and they are making their way, as we see here. These are the cars of the Palestinian police to the bottom right, basically ensuring that the buses would arrive to their destination in the Ramallah Cultural Center, where families have been waiting since the early hours of the morning, hoping that they're going to be reunited with their loved ones. Of course, we need to say that some of those who were coming to Ramallah hoping to bring their loved ones home have been surprised to learn that because there were objections from Israel, that now they're not going to be released into the occupied West Bank, but rather be exiled as part of what Israel does to many Palestinian prisoners. They kick them out, rather, of the Palestinian territory, and they live in exile. The other problem that we're often faced with is that when they are leaving the occupied West Bank and their families are trying to go meet them abroad, then the Israeli forces would stop the Palestinians from traveling because Israel controls the borders controls the borders and can prevent many Palestinians from traveling. So we might be looking at families who will be seeing their loved ones deported and exiled out of Palestine, but have no way of seeing them altogether. These scenes again are remarkable, where we see Palestinians who have been in prison for decades meet with their loved ones and see their families, some for the first time, Darine.
Okay. Nidat, thank you. We'll stay on these live pictures and we'll come back to you in a little while, but I'll bring in Yossi Belin, who's joining us from Tel Aviv this hour. He's a former Israeli justice minister and former deputy minister of foreign affairs. Yossi, you also helped initiate the Oslo peace process in the early 90s, a point that I'm going to come back to in just a moment. But first, I mean, you and I have spoken many times over the past 2 years. As today develops, the captives have been released. Palestinian prisoners are being released as well. Trump now in Israel. What are your thoughts? Just give me your initial thoughts, first of all.
It's overwhelming. It is difficult to understand what is happening. Really, it is a day of joy to see the people who were released, the hostages who were released. It is a day of mourning because so many dead people have not even been brought back to Israel. Some of them will be brought back. The President of the United States is visiting Israel, will address the Knesset very soon. The number of people who came to the square today is unbelievable. It seems like the whole of Israel came to the square of the hostages to welcome them or to celebrate their release. Which means something. It verifies the fact that for the last 2 years, there was a huge majority in all the public opinion polls for the release of the hostages and the end of the war. And today it did happen, and it is very important that President Trump is repeating and says it is the end of the war, it is the end of the war, although there is no official end of war. And the event in Egypt today is very, very, very important. I think so, and I hope so.
What are you going to be looking out for?
To specifying the different articles. It is an important paper that Trump planned, but it is a little bit blurry. You don't know how to move from one stage to another. It was clear that there will be a release of the hostages, freeing the Palestinian prisoners and so on. But that's it. Now, once it is done, how who will actually govern Gaza? This is the main question. You know what is the idea about Trump himself being head of a committee which will monitor the situation there and monitor the institutions that will be there, but you have to rebuild everything, and this is a big question. And there, in the meeting today, I hope that people will talk both about the resources which are badly needed in order to revive Gaza, but also about the governing way of Gaza, who will govern Gaza. And I'm happy that both President Abbas and the Prime Minister Netanyahu are invited belatedly to the Sharm el-Sheikh meeting in Egypt, and with other leaders of the world, which means that there is no substitute for the Palestinian Authority, for the PLO, as a partner for Israel. And if I hope that both people will actually meet each other, shake hands, after the way in which Netanyahu said no Abbas, no Hamas, but Abbas is the leader of the Palestinians.
Right, I mean, this is something Netanyahu has said for the last 2 years, right? He will not allow the authority to be in charge, even though the authority has advocated for peace, it advocates for good relations with Israel, it of course has also security coordination with Israel. But let me ask you this, sir. I'm looking at the peace plan right now. I have it in my hand. Point number 20 says the United States will establish a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon for peaceful and prosperous coexistence. Does that instill any confidence in you that there could be some sort of political process that's going to be discussed going forward?
You know, when I read it first, I said to myself, nice words. But I must say that watching the situation today, I mean, tomorrow, for example, we are going to have a visit of the president of Indonesia. It doesn't happen every day. It means something. It is the biggest Muslim state in the world. So what I'm saying is that things are happening very quickly, and I know that in such situations it is possible to do things that otherwise were unimaginable, because there is a high level of enthusiasm and energy in the people and hope that things like that can happen, that peace in the Middle East, peace between Israel and Palestine is not something which is impossible. We are human beings like everybody else, and we want peace like everybody else. And this is why I hope that with the very strange way in which President Trump is leading and suggested ideas, he may succeed where others failed.
What are you hoping to hear, or what will you be looking out to hear from him when he addresses the Knesset in a short time?
Well, we should wait for him some minutes, because you never know with him. You know, he may surprise himself too, and I don't want to be silly and to say things that he doesn't even dream to say. What I would like to see is to see a Palestinian state side by side with Israel, not in 100 years from now, but in a year from now. And it is not impossible. If there is a real will on the American side, and you see that the Americans are now, because of Trump, calling the shots and say, hey, sit together, knock your heads together, and move in order to have a Palestinian state because you know that there is no other solution, neither for the Palestinians nor for the Israelis, but a two-state solution with a border between them. Palestinians will have the right.
Is it possible under this government? Is it possible under this government that has presided over a genocide? Right, and another reason is that it's presided over the largest settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank in recent history.
Well, there was no genocide. What happened was bad enough. To call it genocide is easy, but
these are the words of the international courts. But these are the words of the international courts.
Yeah, but there is no, You are asking me, and I'm telling you, the number of Palestinians who were killed, although many of them were Hamas combatants, is too big. It is not a genocide. But let us leave it for the historians.
My question is peace possible under this new government? Under this government?
Well, I doubt. I think that in order to have it, if Netanyahu decides to go for it, he will have to change his government. He cannot go, in my view, with the same government in which you have some lunatics who wanted an endless war. I don't know why. And with them, it will be impossible. But with another government, even if it is led by Netanyahu, I don't think that we have to wait for the next year, the elections in October next year, in order to move. And this is why, again, if Trump insists upon something like that, I think that it won't be impossible.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Yossi Beilin, you're a former Israeli Justice Minister and former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, speaking to us from Tel Aviv this hour. Thank you for your time. Nida Ibrahim and Mohammed Masri, you're here with us once again. Nida, what are we looking at? Because now some of the Palestinian prisoners have been released. I mean, these are the pictures. Just talk us through them.
Yes, the Palestinian prisoners are in the buses still making their way from Ofer military prison into the Ramallah's cultural center, where their families are really expecting their release and expecting to be seeing them. By the way, I put this picture that we have on the screen to one of the people I usually talk to from the Prisoners Commission, the Palestinian Authority's Prison Commission, and I asked, who are these? Can you tell me who we're seeing on this picture? And the response was, their shapes and their looks have changed so much that I cannot even identify them. And this is coming from a person who deals with prisoners' stories day in and day out. They have all the records, all the trial cases, all the visitations. Every single piece of information you would get is through these people from the Palestinian authorities.
Quite a statement.
And we've been seeing that a lot over the past 2 years. Just this morning, we've been reporting on Ala Rimawi, who's been released after a 2-year detention, and he lost 40 kilograms of his weight, saying how food was almost inaccessible and how it was very abusive, how he's beaten up several times, how he himself saw people flat out faint and die in front of him without him being able to do anything. This is just one testimony of a lot. But again, they could not recognize the faces of the Palestinian prisoners. So it will be also a difficult moment for the families. I remember one of the releases we have been covering, we've seen the prisoner coming out and telling his family, don't hug me because I have scabies that could be contagious. And this is a case that we've seen a lot, scabies being very spread in Israeli jails without Palestinians having any access to treatment. And the families still embraced him and said, you know what, we don't care, we are so happy to see you, we were waiting for this moment, we're not gonna let it go. So this is the sentiment amongst many Palestinians, that they might be surprised to see the pain and the suffering that their loved ones have endured inside Israeli jails, particularly in the past 2 years, but it's still a moment that was awaited for. And of course there's some pain for the families who say that their loved ones have passed away and could not be with them in this moment, including the family of a room that we've reported on also last night and early this morning. They expect the two brothers to be released. Of course, they are set for being exiled outside of Palestine, but they say their mother has waited all of these years for this moment, but unfortunately she passed away. But the brothers, Jihad and Imad, do not even know that their mother and sister both have passed away. This tells you also about the disconnection that has been happening between the families and the prisoners because of Israel's abuses and prevention of any sort of communication between the families and the prisoners.
And we're just looking at the pictures as well from West Jerusalem. That is inside the Israeli Knesset. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, as well as Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. Standing alongside them is the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, and we expect Trump and Netanyahu to be addressing the Israeli Knesset any moment now. Mohammed, for Trump in Israel, this is hugely symbolic, isn't it? And what's he trying to achieve by going to Israel and then continuing, obviously, onto Sharm el-Sheikh and Egypt?
So I think there are at least a couple of things going on. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, this is part, I think, of his effort to apply pressure on Netanyahu and the Israeli government. This is kind of sealing the deal. I'm quite certain that he's going to say at some point during the course of the speech that this war is over. As I mentioned earlier, he's tying this to his legacy.
You can now upload a video to 11 Labs and get unique music generated based on the context of the video. The music you're hearing now was generated using our new video to music flow. Let me show you how it works. In 11 Labs, head to Studio and then click Video to Music. Upload a video and you'll be given a prompt describing the track that you're about to generate. And you can edit this if you like, but I'm going to hit Generate. This track is entirely unique and it matches the vibe well.
If I want to, I can now add voiceovers and sound effects to my video in 11 Labs Studio.
And this feature is great at adding background music to vlog-style videos, just like this one. Try this feature out for free in 11 Labs Studio or using the link below.
In Israeli politics. He can provide a kind of support from the outside for Netanyahu, and we've heard all kinds of theories from Israel experts about ways in which Netanyahu can stay in power, could win the next election, even if he falls out of the good graces of his far-right partners, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, right? So I think that's going to be part of this as well. I think, people expecting Trump to say bad things about Netanyahu today are going to be in for maybe an unpleasant surprise. I think he's going to say very nice things about Netanyahu. He's going to try to credit Netanyahu to some extent for agreeing to this deal. And of course,
we did see a bit of that when he was speaking to reporters on Air Force One.
We did. But this is obviously going to be a victory lap too for Donald Trump. He's going to give himself all kinds of credit. We heard him this morning say that he has stopped 8 wars and saved millions of lives, and I think we're going to get more of that discourse here when he finally does stand up and speak.
Nida, these are the scenes from Ramallah. Some celebrations going on where the Palestinian prisoners, some of them at least, have just arrived.
Yes, we are expecting them to now be allowed outside of the buses and into their families. It's interesting to see the Palestinian authorities, police trying to organize the scene. We've seen it before, the presence of the Palestinian police in these releases. We've seen it before in previous swap deals, but it seems they want it also to be more organized this time. Again, it's a very emotional moment for so many families who've made their way from so many areas all across the occupied West Bank, trying to bring their loved ones home, a journey that could take them hours, a journey that could, put them in trouble as well, because we see how Israeli soldiers have been dealing with Palestinians on Israeli military checkpoints that are scattered all across the occupied West Bank. As Basil Faraj was just telling us, they go out of one jail, they are going into the big prison, but at least they are with their families, they are with their loved ones, trying to catch up on all the moments that they've missed while they were in prison, trying to know what has happened in the past 2 years when no visitation was allowed. They could not know what was happening outside of jail. Even those who are outside, the families would wait for anyone to be released from a prison to go visit them and say, have you seen my son? Have you heard from him? What can you tell us? Is he okay? Can he survive the tough conditions, including the lack of food? And now we're seeing the bus opening, and of course there is so much anticipation. The person organizing this is a released prisoner himself, and he's now trying to get the prisoners out of the bus and into the arms of their loved ones who have been waiting, anxiously for this moment to happen. We expect these emotional reunions to happen.
Let's listen in for a moment, Nida. Let's just listen in. Obviously emotional scenes, right? The families have come out to greet the Palestinian prisoners that have been released from Israeli jails. Nida, talk to us about who these people are. They have families, they were doctors, they were lawyers, they were engineers, they had lives before being taken into Israeli jails.
Yeah, and their crime is trying to live freely without a military occupation looming over their heads. And the result has led to many of them spending decades of their lives in Israeli jails, including Samir Abu Na'meh, whose imprisonment date is in 1986. It was October of that time. That reminds us of the decades-long movement against Israel's occupation mission to get Palestinians towards freedom. And if you notice there, Dareen, looking at these scenes of the Palestinians, they're mostly like frail-bodied, very thin, and again, to the extent that some of the people who were dealing with their issues did not even recognize them. We are talking about someone like Nasser Abu Srour, who has been detained since 1993. He and others have...
Talking about thousands of Palestinians that are waiting for the 1,700 Palestinian prisoners that are going to be free today. We have been waiting since the morning. Everyone's prepared. Everyone's waiting for the moment the Palestinian prisoners are going to make it to the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis. Now, what's going to happen is the ICRC teams are facilitating everything, the transportation, the logistics of transferring them.
Saucy, stretchy, cheesy on top, hot and tasty, dip it non-stop, devoted to the dough.
Beloved ones and their family members. Now, let me also remind you that the Palestinian prisoners that are going to be freed and transferred to Gaza today are those who have been either arrested or missing since October 7, 2023. We're seeing mothers, we're seeing grandmothers, grandfathers, fathers, children, babies, all waiting for their beloved ones. Today is a day of reunion, today is a day of freedom, and everyone is happy. Palestinians have...
When do you expect you will see them arrive?
When are we expecting the prisoners to arrive? So what happened is they did not start moving until the Israeli captives made it out of the Gaza Strip, and this was a couple of hours ago. Now, according to the ICRC teams, they're saying that they are on their way. Now, when is that going to happen? It's definitely in the next coming hours, maybe an hour, maybe two, but I'm telling you, everyone is waiting. Everyone is on standby for the minute the Palestinian prisoners make it to the Gaza Strip, and especially to Khan Yunis in Nasser's hospital.
Hind Khudari reporting from Khan Yunis, where we are expecting a little later today, at some point probably in the coming hours, could be sooner than that, some 1,700 Palestinians from Gaza who had been taken by Israel during this war to be released back to their families. They should get a medical check at Nasser Hospital, which is where Hind was. We will go back to that when it happens. Joining us in the studio, Mohammed El-Masri, political analyst and a professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Mohammed, as always, good to have you with us. We're looking at these live pictures, Donald Trump at the Israeli Knesset. What's the message going to be from Trump?
Well, I mean, as Noor was saying, clearly there's going to be a kind of victory lap. Trump has been giving himself all kinds of credit over the past couple of weeks. This morning in his speech, he said he's saved millions of lives, and this is the 8th war that he's stopped. I think we might need somebody to run those numbers, but in any case, this is going to be a victory lap. But the other thing is, I do think that this is designed in part to apply pressure to Benjamin Netanyahu. After all of this pomp and circumstance, not just today in Israel, but also with the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, and this very hyperbolic discourse that Trump has been engaged with engaging in over the past couple of weeks, it would be very difficult for Benjamin Netanyahu to then go back to war. So I think, this, for me,
I forget what the quote. I'm paraphrasing the quote, but it was something along the lines of "I didn't really know."
Right. That was. I mean, to me, that was remarkable. That was a remarkable moment for multiple reasons.
Nida Ibrahim, our correspondent, is in the studio with us as well. A privilege, as always.
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words, create your brand, your opportunity, your breakthrough. Feeling a vibe? Run with it. From can't look away to gotta have it. Make every detail yours. Bring out what's hot. Remove what's not. Crystallize it. Instantly set a tone that speaks in your voice to your audience. Keep moving. Your site grows with you. Add solutions that meet you where you are and take you where you want to go. Smooth to make, easy to love.
Like Robin, you can choose the right tutor for you from more than 2,000 subjects on Superprof. We can get away with first, which is to try and get the captives back into Israel, as well as try and organize a prisoner swap deal. We've seen that part. We've seen Hamas release the remaining 20 alive captives. No more alive captives are in Gaza, but the Israelis are yet to continue the releases. They've released the first part, which is those who are going to be making their way from Israeli prisons into the occupied West, who's going to come. Of course, there are talks about the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair being in charge, but then, as we've been talking in our coverage earlier...
On that, can I jump in about Tony Blair? Because I think that's a headline for everybody. You know, Tony Blair of Iraq War fame, former British Prime Minister. Donald Trump today on Air Force One, he was asked about it, and all of a sudden, I thought this was a lock. Tony Blair, part of the governance of Gaza, I thought this was one of the few things we knew for sure, and today Donald Trump said, I have to make sure if he's popular with everybody because he might not be.
And this is part of what we've been discussing also earlier, that it seems that the Americans and President Trump is showing flexibility when it comes to certain points, presumably after pushback from the Arabs, from the mediators, that you don't bring Tony Blair with his reputation in the Middle East to be running Gaza. Of course, when it comes to Palestinians, they do not want any sort of international auspices to be governing them. They want to have a say in their future. They want self-determination. They want sovereignty over their lands. But again, this brings us back to the issue that you were mentioning as part of the sticking points of what will Hamas disarm or not. As far as the sources I've been speaking to from the party, they say that they're willing to let go of some certain weapons, like the offensive weapons, but not to be disarmed totally and leave its members subject to the crimes, to the gangs that we've been seeing, and many of them are not just supported by Israel, but also armed by Israel inside Gaza to kind of put pressure on Hamas and attack its members. So this is a very important situation, very important issue to keep an eye on and see how they're going to find a leeway, how they're going to find a way to bring the two parties to agree on that. But again, Palestinians will be looking to see if Israel is going to make good on its promises and withdraw to the points that were mentioned in the Trump plan and not try and find obstacles to avoid doing that.
Yeah. As is evident from speaking to both of you, there are a few certainties today. Among them, what has already happened, what we can say for sure, which is that all living captives held by Hamas and other groups in Gaza have now been released. The bodies we expect will be released. There's a little question mark over that because Hamas has said that they don't know where all of them are, so that may take several days, maybe even longer. So in fact, there's a big question mark over that. Beyond that, and beyond the release of the Palestinian prisoners, almost only question marks, and we want to be very clear with our viewers about what we are watching today. Nida, Mohammed, thank you very much. Let's go back to Noor O'Day, who is in Amman, Jordan. Noor, we were just making...
Well, let me just start, Cyril, by telling you one thing that we thought we knew less than half an hour ago is no longer. The office of the Israeli Prime Minister has just issued a statement saying that while Benjamin Netanyahu actually received an invitation to attend Sharm el-Sheikh conference, he will not be able to do that. And according to that statement, it is because of the holidays in Israel. Now, of course, one can read a lot into that, but no matter how you read it, we need to keep in mind the fact that his coalition partners were not going to be happy, and there was a lot of talk about his attendance meaning early elections. There was also the question of the embarrassment of his attendance, having to shake hands with leaders who in theory would need to arrest him, given the fact that he has an arrest warrant out for his detention by the International Criminal Court. So for now, no Netanyahu in Sharm el-Sheikh, and that could change any minute as we've been, covering this for the past few hours. Things have been moving.
Mr. President Herzog and his wife, his spouse, distinguished audience, led by our great friend, the greatest, the President of the United States, President Donald J. Trump.
ברוך בואך לירושלים בירתנו הנצחית.
We welcome you to Jerusalem, our eternal capital. You are welcome to Israel. On this day, filled with emotion, which will be carved in the history of our people, so will you, your name will be carved in the legacy of our nation. It has already been carved in the history of humanity, yet to us we do remember our friends, and we realize the instrumental role you have played to bring home the remaining of our captives. And we received the good news an hour ago that all the Israeli live captives have been brought home. How wonderful these moments are. We have waited long for this moment, and we were all committed to bringing them home. That's why I would like to, on behalf of myself and on behalf of the entire nation, would like to thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
The teleprompters are working well, though we're not using them. But I'm not sure about the translation. So I'll say words in English. President Trump, the Knesset welcomes you and your distinguished delegation to Jerusalem, our eternal capital. This is your first visit to Israel since you recognized Jerusalem as our capital and moved the embassy here. Thank you, President Trump, for that. There are many other reasons to thank you since your last visit here. Thank you for recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Thank you for standing up to the lies against Israel in the United Nations. Thank you for recognizing in your 2020 peace plan our rights in Judea and Samaria, the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. Thank you for brokering the historic Abraham Accords. Abraham, Eskemei Avraham. Thank you for withdrawing from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. Thank you for supporting Operation Rising Lion and for your bold decision to launch Operation Midnight Hammer. Boy, is that, you gotta hear this. This is the most fitting name ever named for a military operation, because a little after midnight, you really hammered them. My friends, this is only a partial list, but it's enough to affirm what I've said time and again. Donald Trump is the greatest friend that the state of Israel has ever had in the White House. No American president has ever done more for Israel. And as I said in Washington, it ain't even close. It's really not a match. Mr. President, today we welcome you here to thank you for your pivotal leadership in putting forward a proposal that got the backing of almost the entire world. A proposal that brings all our hostages home. A proposal that ends the war by achieving all our objectives. A proposal that opens the door to an historic expansion of peace in our region and beyond our region. Mr. President, you are committed to this peace. I am committed to this peace, and together, Mr. President, we will achieve this peace. We've done it before. We've done it before in the Abraham Accords, and we'll do it again. Mr. President, today the Jewish calendar marks the end of 2 years of war. That war began on October 7th, on the Jewish festival of Simchat Torah. You always tell me, and you tell the world, remember October 7th. Mr. President, we remember. We remember the thousands of Hamas terrorists who stormed into our towns and kibbutzim. We remember the 1,200 people Hamas savagely slaughtered in cold blood, including dozens and dozens of Americans. We remember entire families burnt alive as they embraced each other. We remember the beautiful young Israelis brutally gunned down at the Nova Music Festival. We remember the hundreds of our citizens who were dragged into the dungeons of Gaza, including 12 Americans, men and women, young and old, babies and elderly Holocaust survivors. My friends, Mr. President Donald, these monsters take babies as hostages. In response to this barbaric attack on October 7th, Israel did what it had to do. With indomitable courage, we set out to defend our people, to defeat our enemies, and to release our hostages. Our heroic soldiers fought like lions. They fought on the front lines of civilization and barbarism. Israel achieved amazing victories over Hamas and the entire Iran terror axis. Sinwar, Def, Hania, Nasrallah, Assad, they're all gone. Iran's nuclear weapons and ballistic missile program, with your enormous help, Mr. President, rolled back. Half the Houthi leadership wiped out. But the price of this victory, the price of these victories, has been heavy. Nearly 2,000 of Israel's finest were lost, nearly half in battle. They left behind parents, spouses, siblings, and children. Their love and laughter, their promise and potential were lost forever. To the families of our fallen fighters, many of them are here, I say, I know the depth of your pain. I know the inconsolable grief that will accompany you for the rest of your lives. The state of Israel bows its head in eternal gratitude to our fallen heroes. Because of these heroes, our nation will survive. Because of these heroes, our nations will thrive. And because of these heroes, our nation will have peace. Mr. President, thousands of our brave soldiers were also wounded, suffering terrible blows to body and soul. Brave soldiers like Ari Spitz. Ari is an American. Ari is an American Israeli who was injured saw the film of those two boys crying out in pain, "Father is dead. Why? Why did God save me?" Mr. President, my friend Donald, I've seen some very tough things in my life, but I couldn't bring myself to watch those boys suffering again. So I didn't see this film except once. Yet Sabine, their mother, has had the strength and fortitude to show this film across the world. And my wife Sarah and I asked her, "Sabina, how do you do it? Why do you do it?" And she answered, "I do it to show the entire world the monsters Israel is fighting and the justice of our cause." This is what she's doing once again in Los Angeles. Sabine, you can hear me now. So I want to tell you on behalf of all of us, you embody the spirit of our biblical heroines, Deborah, Ruth, and Esther. You too are the spirit of Israel, and we all salute you. Mr. President, you asked me on our many conversations during the 12-day war with Iran, you asked me, how are the people holding up? And I said to you, our people are strong. Israelis are a nation of lions with unlimited resolve to defend our country and secure our future. The people give strength to our soldiers, and the people give strength to me and to my colleagues. The Jewish people have risen from the ashes time and again, but when we formed the State of Israel and the Army of Israel, we pledged never again would be defenseless against our enemies. And that resolute strength not only assures our survival, it assures our future, it assures peace. We have paid a high price for this war, but our enemies now understand just how powerful and just how determined Israel is. They understand that attacking Israel on October 7th was a catastrophic mistake. They understand that Israel is strong and that Israel is here to stay. And this, Mr. President, is the indispensable foundation of peace. Peace through strength. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a momentous day, a day of great joy as the remaining hostages come home. My wife Sarah and I have met with the hostage families many times. There were no words to describe their agony, only tears of bottomless sorrow and unimaginable pain. At the beginning of the war, I promised to bring all the hostages home. Today, with the indispensable help, the determined and focused help, the unremitting help of President Trump and his team, and with the incredible sacrifice and courage of the soldiers of Israel, we are fulfilling that promise. It has been a long journey to get here. In the first week of the war, our brave soldiers put military pressure on Hamas, and the international community put diplomatic pressure on them. This enabled us to secure the release of over 100 hostages. In heroic rescue attempts behind enemy lines, Israel's special forces rescued 8 live hostages and brought back the remains of dozens more. But as time went on, we all know what happened. The diplomatic pressure was turned on its head. More and more governments bought into Hamas's false propaganda. More and more governments succumbed to anti-Semitic mobs in their own countries. They just turned on Israel. They called for us to surrender to Hamas demands. Just leave Gaza immediately, they said. End the war without committing to disarm Hamas, without committing to demilitarize Gaza. Had Israel succumbed to those demands, not only would Sinwar, Nasrallah, Assad, and Iran's missile and nuclear program remain intact. Not only that, because in no time, the Hamas killers would be back on the border fence, ready to repeat the horrors of October 7th again and again, as they vowed to do. But just at that point of maximum pressure on Israel, a man named Donald J. Trump was elected President of the United States. And ladies and gentlemen, overnight, everything changed. Everything. Mr. President, thanks to your unequivocal backing of Israel, we secured a second hostage deal within weeks of your election. And in the months that followed, we worked closely together to forge a path to bring the remaining hostages home and end the war. End the war in a way that ensures the disarming of Hamas, the demilitarization of Gaza, and that Gaza would never again pose a threat to Israel. 2 months ago, you fully backed my decision to send the IDF into the last Hamas stronghold in Gaza City. You shared my view that this military pressure would help free the hostages. And despite all the criticism, all the naysayers, we were right. Hamas caved in. And 2 weeks ago, you succeeded in doing something miraculous. You succeeded in doing something that no one believed was possible. You brought most of the Arab world. You brought most of the world behind your proposal to free the hostages and end the war. Thank our negotiating team. I believe that the close cooperation between the two of us, between our two nations, combining Israel's military pressure and President Trump's unmatched global leadership. I have to tell you, I've seen a lot of American presidents. I've seen them all in the time that I've been here, and I've been here quite a lot of time. I've never seen anyone move the world so quickly, so decisively, so resolutely as our friend President Donald J. Trump. pressure and President Trump's global leadership, we achieved this historic moment. It's a moment of indescribable joy as our nation embraces our sons who are coming home. Mr. President, this week, Jews around the world are going to read the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, in the Bible. The Bible has many miraculous moments. One of them was your decision to bomb Fordo. I think it was a pivot of history because it wasn't meant only to bomb Fordo. That action and your previous action of taking out Qasem Soleimani, the architect of death, I think that changed the balance of power in the world. You brought America back again to the driver's seat. Now, I said that we're going to read this week the book of Ecclesiastes. It's not a book of action. It's a book of meditations, of thought, a perspective on life and on death. And in this book we read the immortal words of King Solomon. To everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. Et milchama ve'et shalom. A time for peace and a time for war. The last 2 years have been a time of war. The coming years will hopefully be a time for peace. Peace inside Israel and peace outside Israel. I look forward to continuing marching with you on the path we paved together with the Abraham Accords. Under your leadership, we can forge new peace treaties with Arab countries in the region and Muslim countries beyond the region. Abraham's children will work together to build a better future, a future that will unite civilization against barbarism, light against darkness, and hope against despair. And my friends, I believe that with President Trump's leadership, this will happen a lot faster than people think. As Prime Minister of Israel, I extend my hand to hold those who seek peace with us. No one wants peace more than the people of Israel. Israel will always remain vigilant in defending itself. And Israel will always remain full of hope. Hope is our national anthem. Hope is our creed. Hope is our strength. It is time, my friends, to realize that hope and expand the circle of peace. Mr. President, thank you for all you have done for us. I have submitted your nomination to be the first non-Israeli recipient of the Israel Prize, Israel's highest award. As to that other prize, just a question of time, you'll get it. But I want you to get the Israel Prize, our highest award, to our greatest friend.
What I can say is that it is a kind of a commitment, a new commitment, actually, to end the war. it is. I presume that it is the first time in which he spoke about the end of the war, pushed to it by Trump himself, who talked about it, and that is very, very important.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, distinguished guests, Your Excellency, President Trump.
Yossi, Netanyahu is claiming victory after 2 years of war on Gaza. Does the Israeli public see this moment as a victory for them first? And do they see this moment as a victory for Netanyahu?
Well, we have to wait a little bit for the polls, but generally speaking, they wanted to end the war by more than 70%. And I'm not sure whether, I mean, people are talking about a military victory, but a policy defeat. And I think that there is something to it. I think that Netanyahu is trying to change this situation by his new commitment to peace. And the question is whether it is going to be followed by very concrete steps, because he committed himself to the plan of Trump, and Trump is speaking about a Palestinian state. What does it mean? We will have to see. But he was very positive, very general, and his English is okay.
Well, Netanyahu's English is famously very good. But I want to pick you up on this idea that Netanyahu committed to peace. What did he say that sounded to you like a commitment to peace? I mean, he celebrated the day, he celebrated victory by Israel, he gave himself also a lot of praise and his decision-making. What in all of that sounded like a commitment to peace?
Because he said it is time. There is time to war, and there is time to peace. And I waited for him to say something like that, and he said it, meaning the war for me, for Netanyahu, is over. Now we have to go to the diplomatic area and to work there. And he understands that what is happening in front of us is very quick, although he will not be today in Egypt because of the holiday, or maybe because of other reasons, but he will not be there. Nevertheless, things will happen without him, and maybe there will be important decisions today about the shift from Hamas to something else in governing Gaza, and also assuring that law and order is there, and so on. And the question is, how is he going to refer to the decisions which will be taken? We will know in few hours.
So Donald Trump will be the next speaker. Right now it's Yair Lapid. After him, the U.S. president will address the Knesset. What do you expect from Trump?
I never know.
Do you have? Okay, well let me.
Do you know? I mean,
no. Well, I mean, if I knew, I wouldn't be asking the question.
My knowledge is exactly like yours. Maybe I know less. I mean, you never expect. He's always spontaneous. He's always speaking in a way of associations and things like that. And sometimes you are surprised by his commitment and by his decisiveness. I think that he is. I mean, it was mentioned today by Netanyahu that we will support him getting the Nobel Prize next year. And I think that he accepted it. I mean, it is not that after not receiving the prize, he decided to leave the ideas of peace. With or without the prize, he will continue, apparently. This is his biggest success. And he would like to continue with this success and to prove that he can really change the Middle East and perhaps change the world. He is very, very ambitious.
Yossi Beilin, former Israeli Justice Minister, thank you very much for joining us on Al Jazeera. We'll speak again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's bring in now Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher, who's in Washington, D.C. Alan, this will not come as a surprise to you. We are still keeping a very close watch on who's speaking at the Knesset. Right now, it's Yair Lapid, the opposition leader. We expect the U.S. president will be speaking once and as soon as that particular speech is done. So explain to us from Trump's point of view, from the White House's point of view, what are they in Israel for?
Well, it's a victory lap. It's to get a pat on the back, to shake hands, to be told how wonderful you are and how this could never have happened without, as Benjamin Netanyahu said, his global leadership. And to a degree that's true. Many people would accept that perhaps the Israelis didn't move until Donald Trump put pressure on them, that there was a realization that things financially, diplomatically might change, that Donald Trump was running out of patience with Benjamin Netanyahu, something he'd mentioned publicly on a number of occasions, something no other president had said publicly, even though we know that he had a very difficult relationship with Barack Obama, and then of course was not impressed with some of the things that Joe Biden was trying to do to bring an end to the war. And you'll remember, of course, that about a year ago there was a similar deal on the table that was signed, but it was the Israelis that walked away from it. So Donald Trump is there to take his victory lap. But this is a big moment for him, and he's aware of that. It's historic. And he really has to meet the moment with more than just an ordinary Donald Trump speech. He has to lay out the guidelines for what happens from here. Peace processes can be long, they can be difficult, they can have obstacles in the way, and Donald Trump perhaps knows that and understands that things can change very quickly. But by going to Israel, by going to Sharm el-Sheikh afterwards, he's put his name on this peace deal. And if it all falls apart, it's his name on the peace deal. So he is going to make sure that all sides comply with what he's put in place, because he believes it is significant not just for the Middle East, but around the world.
Alan, thank you so much for that reporting from Washington, D.C. So it's just past 1100 hours GMT. You're watching Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of what's undoubtedly a pivotal moment in a breakthrough ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The long-awaited release of the last living Israeli captives has now taken place. You're looking at live pictures from inside the Israeli Knesset, by the way, where we're expecting Donald Trump to be speaking right after the opposition leader Yair Lapid, who is speaking right now. We also know that's what happened, that Palestinian prisoners have also left Israel's Ofer prison. This all happening, as we're saying, just as the U.S. President Donald Trump is due to address the Israeli parliament. Donald Trump was welcomed with minutes-long standing ovation as he entered the Knesset alongside the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who lavished praise on the man he described as the greatest friend that Israel has ever had.
We welcome you here to thank you for your pivotal leadership in putting forward a proposal that got the backing of almost the entire world. A proposal that brings all our hostages home. A proposal that ends the war by achieving all our objectives. A proposal that opens the door to an historic expansion of peace in our region and beyond our region. Mr. President, you are committed to this peace. I am committed to this peace, and together, Mr. President, we will achieve this peace.
Okay, so that is the opposition leader, Yair Lapid. He is speaking in the Knesset.